Okay, we're now live for this next webinar of the day. So this one I'll let our moderators take over and explain to you what this one is all about. Before, I just want to thank Quanex as presenting sponsors. So maybe Al, you can start this up for us.
Yes, so our session today is a panel discussion with building officials from various regions in Canada. We have representatives from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast. And we're going to talk about windows, doors, and skylights. And we're going to talk about what, we're going to basically get your opinion on how the industry is doing. And we'd like to know which kinds of issues regarding windows, doors, and skylights are relevant in your various jurisdictions, and discuss those with you. So we're very happy that you could be with us today. I'm Al Yogelis. I'm the Technical Director for Fenestration Canada. Dave, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Dave Goldsmith, Senior Code and Compliance Engineer for Plygem, a Cornerstone Building Brands company, and I co-chair Fenestration Canada's technical committee.
Thank you. And I'd like each of you to maybe introduce ourselves. We're going to work from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast. If you could tell us what municipality you work for and your role within that municipality. And let's start with that. We'll start with Steve Nason.
Good day, good afternoon. My name is Steve Nason. I'm a building inspector here in Rothesay, New Brunswick. So we're a community of about 10,000. I'm the sole inspector for the municipality, and pretty well we do all the inspections all the way through.
Thank you, Steve. And then we move on to Ontario. We have Gerald Moore. Gerald, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Gerald Moore. I'm with RSM Building Consultants. We do a lot of support services for municipalities, which includes inspections and for municipalities. Currently, we support about 30 municipalities in Ontario. And so I've been working as a building official for many years within the municipal infrastructure. So I'm happy to be here today.
So does that mean you're a province-wide building inspector in the sense that you jump in here, there, or anywhere, or in your role? In other words, is your role particular to specific issues in jurisdictions?
Yeah, municipalities hire us under a support contract. So if they have too many permits or they have a shortage of staff or they need help with, as plan reviews, especially if things come in. And in Ontario, we have a 10-day for house permits deadline with regards to having them out. So municipalities are forced to look at other ways in order to deal with a large influx of permits. So we help out with a lot of that. And then, of course, we do a lot of training sessions and webinars. So we do a lot of support within the kind of the code environment in Ontario.
Okay, that's interesting.
And we act as a building, even myself, I do act as a building official. I help out a lot of the northern Ontario. There's a few municipalities that act as the chief building official and do inspections and plan review up in those areas.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Zane DesRoches in Medicine Hat.
I'm a commercial, I do mostly commercial building inspections and plan reviews for the city of Medicine Hat, though I do residential whenever it's required. And I do mostly plan reviews, not get out as much as I'd like to, but I've been doing building official since about 2007, so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Sepehr.
I'm a building energy specialist with City of Richmond, which is just south of Vancouver. So this is a somewhat new position. I work with both plan reviewers and building inspectors. I'll hopefully get to talk more about this, but as you know, we have a new energy efficiency code within the BC building code called the energy step code. So I've been mostly involved in that, both in plan review and also inspections.
Great. So now that we know a little bit about where you're from and what you're doing, what are issues that are in terms of windows and doors, fenestration products? How do you interact with those at your end, Zane? Do you get involved in some ways with the window and door industry?
Yes, we're quite blessed in terms of residential. Everything comes tested. Everything comes with an energy rating or a U value. So meeting, and we tend not to run into much of an issue regarding non-compliant product. It's most of the manufacturers provide all the documentation that we require. When we move on to commercial products, that becomes quite gray, mostly because a lot of that product is built on site or built, and then assembled on site, and really is not a tested product. And I'm also finding that the doors, commercial doors, have very little or no testing. The testing that I did find, actually the doors failed. So I'm not exactly sure if there's even actually commercial product that is compliant to the NACB currently.
Now, are you talking about, when you say failure, are you talking about energy performance, or are you talking about air, water, structural kind of issues?
I'm talking about U values, sorry. Yeah.
U values, eh? Okay.
Yeah.
So your focus with windows and doors is mainly with respect to energy performance, is that right?
No. Yes, I would say our focus would be mostly on energy performance. We assume the doors are meeting the other requirements. But again, on commercial products, there is at least air leakage testing that you can get on those doors, but very little energy testing.
So in other words, you're having a hard time getting energy performance values for commercial doors.
Yes, that no problem getting a door slab U value, but in assembly is where we run into the problem. There's actually, I don't even think, I thought I've seen one test, and it was one that did not make the U value requirement for this area. So
interesting. And this was the prescriptive requirements of the National Energy Code for buildings, is that right?
Correct. But even using say you went to a modeling, the modeling assumes a value on the door, and if there's no proof of that. So I don't think the manufacturers are out testing their commercial doors for U values, air infiltration, those kind of things. Yeah.
Right.
I think what people are accepting are actually the U values of the slabs.
By slabs, commercial doors are usually glass doors, aren't they?
No, not always. There's
No?
a lot of metal doors, in and out exit doors and stuff that are strictly a metal door, right?
Right. Yeah.
The issue about glass doors, all of that's modeled mathematically. No one's actually tested those products because they're put in assemblies that could be 30 feet long of pure glass, right? And frame. So there's no way to test that product. It's all done, we assume a math. Conair is one of the, is the best, will provide you with that. They'll provide you with a model done on the units.
Right.
Giving the U value. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, over to you in Atlantic Canada.
Well,
What are the issues that are that you monitor for windows and doors, and what are the issues that you would want to comment on?
well, as you know, I've got a pretty good system here. I've been working at windows and doors for a number of years, and it's been a bit of an uphill challenge, but I think we're getting there. What we do, and we've discussed this before, is I ask for a quote sheet, a non-price quote sheet to come in with their building permit application. And on that non-price quote sheet, I want to see the energy, the PG rating for the zone. I want to see the tested size and the water penetration on that. Then I can do a plan review on that and deal with any issues that pop up with that. And once we do that, you know, because again, it's a lot easier to do that here than look at labels out on the field. So once we've looked at that, we can generally go through the issues. In Atlantic Canada, a lot of the manufacturers have their testing and their quote sheets up to speed. What I find is that there's some manufacturers that are coming in and they don't have their testings, and I would say they're coming in from outside the Atlantic bubble. And so we have to address that. And that mostly is with doors and mullions is what we run into. But once again, with that quote sheet avenue, I can at least address it from there. One of the big things that I find is that the consumers are a bit dumbfounded because what they think is that they think it's illegal to sell a door in Canada that hasn't been tested. So when we have that conversation, they say, why do you want to know that or whatever? They're just dumbfounded that a door or a window can be sold in Canada that hasn't been tested or doesn't meet the criteria of the building code.
So you're saying consumers are surprised by this?
Yeah, they're very surprised at that. And the other thing they look for, the only thing is that they look for is they make sure that it's energy rated. The rest don't matter. And that's all part of the education for consumers, because once you tell them it's more than energy, there's other pieces to the puzzle than energy, then they get it. They understand that they buy a door that may be energy efficient, but they also don't want a door that leaks. So if it doesn't have any water resistant testing, there's that possibility that it will leak. So once you have that discussion with them, they're more than pleased that you're looking after for them.
So, you know, you're dealing mostly with Part 9 buildings, are you? Or do you deal with large buildings too?
We do Part 9 and Part 3 buildings, but mostly it's Part 9 buildings. And with the Part 9 or a Part 3 building, I'm even finding that on plan specs, you don't get them on the plan specs, you know, so we always have to ask for that quote sheets, whether an architect is involved or whether a house designer is involved.
So are the doors supplied by the same manufacturer as the windows, or is it a pre-hanger market like it is in BC?
Let's see, the doors made, well, a fenestration company, manufacturer, they may supply a door and they may supply a window, depending on the application. I'm not sure but I think it's, as you say, is a pre-hung door.
Oh yeah. So what we see in BC is some companies specialize in the swing doors, and then
Yes,
so they get
okay.
them from these pre-hangers, and they
Yes.
only get them from pre-hangers, and they
Yes.
use test reports that they didn't commission. You know, so they don't have proper test reports. Where tendency when you get it from a manufacturer who does everything is for have proper test reports for the doors as well as the windows. So that's why I was curious.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes we get reports that I know that are not tested by the manufacturer. The information is supplied by the molding instructor or the molding manufacturers, but we have people that are only in the door business. That's all they sell is doors, exterior doors, and it's an option for the distributor to put the code. That's an extra option. If you want a code compliant, we push option B, right? So, but that they're sold all across Canada, and I just shake my head because it's not a town of Rothesay code. It's a Canadian building code that's required.
Well, that's kind of what we find with the commercial doors. They buy the frames from someone, the slab from someone, the weather stripping from someone, and then they assemble it in a shop. But there's really no way to test that product or ever being tested at all.
That would be in a Part 3, though. Would it be, or
Yes.
9? Yes.
Part 3, yeah.
Yeah, Part 3.
Well, some commercial Part 9 buildings as well, right?
Yes.
That are not using a manufacturer such as, you know, Ply Gem or, you know, one of the nationals, right?
Yeah.
Gerald, in your area, what comments would you have about the issues that you see with windows and doors?
I think the most recent thing that we have is that, of course, we have the Ontario Building Code based on the model National Building Code of Canada. And for years, we've had a different code that the Ontario government decides to take the national code, twist it a little bit, and add a couple flips and make it a little bit different. The good thing is that the provincial government in Ontario has mandated to make the Ontario Building Code more in conformance with the National Building Code, to make them basically the same by 2025. So they're doing this by doing two stages. One stage happened just in January of 2020. There was a major change of the Ontario Building Code. It was kind of change half of the code to the National Building Code. And then the next one, I think, is going to happen closer to maybe 2025. So one of the things that it did change was it changed our window section, which we weren't used to. All you were probably used to that section. So they did a big change to all of us. So it was old news to everybody else in Canada, but in Ontario, we're like, what is this new section? So at the beginning of the year, I think there was a little bit of some confusion on some of the new structural standards that were brought into the code that we thought were brought in. It was already in there on site built as opposed to manufactured. And so there's a little bit of confusion there. I know I'm currently having some discussions with a lot of them, especially with the Ontario Building Officials Association, on getting some better understanding of these provisions, because they were struggling with some of those. So that, I think, in January was one of the big things, and working with the manufacturers.
Which part of the code? Which part of the code would that have been, Gerald?
That would have been under 9.6 of the building code and 9.7 with regards to site built. And I don't know, like part 9 of the code, and nobody really does site built anymore. It's very rare. So those provisions that were added probably aren't really going to reach its head very often. But I think the fact that it was changed had some building officials in Ontario wondering, okay, now do we need to have some more strenuous details on how the windows are constructed? So I know right now I'm working with a few of them, and I think, and this is great to be part of the group today, because I think I would like to continue the relationship in order to get a better understanding of these requirements, so that in Ontario we can sort of get on the same page with the rest of Canada with regards to these changes. So that, I think, is the big change that we had happen in January of this year. The other thing too, of course, is back in 2006, that's when Ontario brought in the energy efficiency sections of the code and really enhanced those. So dealing with modeling of the commercial buildings, even in modeling of the Part 9 buildings, is something that we deal with. A lot of times right now we're dealing with checklists. We have them submit checklists for review, and we're checking labels on windows. But how far do we go? In talking with Steve, he digs deep, and which is good. And I don't know how deep some of us are digging in Ontario, but I think definitely it's an issue that is becoming more important as energy efficiency evolves.
And Sepehr, from your point of view, you've said you're specializing in energy performance. Are you involved with other aspects of Windows or primarily the energy?
Yeah, not very much. It's really, well, the air, water, and structure aspects are inspected by my building inspector colleagues, but I'm not involved in those. I do hear about these funny stories, but not necessarily directly involved.
Oh, just if they're funny stories, what funny stories do you hear?
Yeah, well, there are all these stories about labels and, applying labels on site. I would say more so with, again, energy metric labels, but I have had one time where one of the inspectors came to me and said, I was on site doing a shielding inspection and there were no labels on windows whatsoever. No NAFS labels, no energy labels. And the inspector would ask the contractor, well, where did you get these windows? Where are the labels? And then the contractor say, well, wait a minute, goes to the truck, comes back with a bunch of labels and says, okay, here's a bunch of labels. Where do you want me to put them? So this is this is definitely an oddity. It's not that common. Again, we have had several similar occasions with energy labels, but with NAFS labels, not as much. So these are, I guess, not the common situation, but we definitely have had those situations. And well, I call it funny, but it's really scary in a way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of Windows, you're monitoring the energy performance specifically. Can you tell us about what you're doing there in Richmond and what are your hot issues right now that you're dealing with?
Yeah, well, I should probably, if I may, just briefly talk about the energy step code and how it somewhat has changed the game, because it is now a performance-based code. So, as far as energy efficiency is concerned, we're now we have done away with prescriptive requirements for the building envelope. And now we are looking at a performance-based approach where, so the gist of it is that I don't care what kind of insulation you put in the wall. I don't care what the U value of your window is. Just show me that this building as a whole performs better than a certain, threshold. And where we are at now is called step 1, which means you want to see buildings to perform better, and that's for single-family dwellings. We want to see buildings perform better than minimum prescriptive code requirements, right? But what that does is that basically every single building is a new situation, because as I said, we're no longer looking to see whether the U value meets 1.8 or whatever the prescriptive requirement is, but it's really about, okay, what kind of U value are you looking at? What kind of solar heat gain coefficient are you using? And then what that does to the energy performance of your building as modeled. And then are those specifications properly documented, at plan review stage? And then when it comes to construction during inspections, are we seeing the same product with the same specs built and used in the building, right? So I guess it has somewhat made our job a bit more complicated in terms of, because we have to do these checks and cross checks at various stages. So that's the context. That's what we're up with in this new era of the performance-based codes.
So
now,
no prescriptive at all?
Well, as far as energy is concerned, no prescriptive. Well, we still do have the air, water, structural, requirements. But when you think about the building code, so 936 energy efficiency is now I should say that in the BC building code, there are 2 pathways now, and different jurisdictions can choose to go down the prescriptive path or performance-based path. So Richmond has adopted the performance-based pathway, meaning that we're not looking at the effective R value of the walls or envelope assemblies necessarily. We're looking at the energy performance of the building as modeled. So
is that a blower door test on every unit, then commercial and residential?
Yeah, so it gets a bit more complicated than that, but yes, if you're using the EnerGuide rating system for showing compliance with the performance requirements, then you'll have to do a blower door test on every single unit. If you're using, I think it's 936.5, which is a different, so you're not necessarily following the EnerGuide rating system, and that's for residential mostly, then you'll have to do a whole building air tightness test. So it's not necessarily on each single unit, but you do basically one air tightness or air leakage test for the entire building. It's not unit by unit.
And Richmond is at step 1 right now? What step level?
So for different archetypes or occupancies, we're at different levels. For single family, we're at step 1. For townhouses, part 9, we are at step 3. For part 3 residential, we're at step 3. For commercial retail, we're at step 2. So we're kind of at different stages for different occupancies and different building archetypes. But we are up to step 3 for single family by the end of this year.
And that's up to the municipality, or that you choose your own step?
Yeah, so what the province has done is that they have laid out this timeline saying that starting from where we were in 2018, which was roughly the national code, we want to go to net zero energy ready by 2032, and that's step 4 for part 3 and step 5 for part 9. So the province has signaled that they're gonna, in the code updates in different cycles, they're gonna make these changes, but then different municipalities can choose to go along that basically timeline at a faster pace, and that's what we are doing. So we're a bit ahead of the province, but at least for the time being, the plan is that by 2032, everybody will be at the same stage.
What step
Yeah,
is
that's
that?
interesting because in Ontario, the applicant's given the option of a performance or a prescriptive view. They
Same
can
here, yeah.
choose either way, and so that's interesting. And then, you know, the other thing I find about it too is now windows are competing with furnaces and insulation, and so as a whole package, it's not just about, you know, so let's not spend as much on the furnace, but let's spend more money on the windows. So yeah, I think a performance is a great way, and I find most of the people in Ontario, a lot of the high-end custom builders and a lot of the other builders are saying, you know what, there is savings with going on a performance model because you're really looking at the whole package as opposed to trying to pick and choose what you like better. And so I'm seeing a lot of that where we're getting these performance type modeling. One of the things they brought into Ontario was these drain waste heat recovery units, or these copper pipes that recover the water that got mandated in the Ontario code. Not a lot of people like them. So the only way to get out of them is to do a model and to spend a little more money on your furnace or your windows. So it's interesting how energy efficiency is leading windows competing with furnaces.
You could,
the problem
you know,
with performance, sorry.
That's an interesting. Oh, go ahead, Zane.
I'm just worried about the performance level is because once you've done a performance model on a home or a building, now you're at a point where any changes to that building, internal or external, in terms of heating or any kind of energy use, change a window, change a door, add a door, add a window, add an addition, you now have to remodel that building for the minorest thing. Whereas if you do prescriptive, you could just change one window prescriptively and then you wouldn't have an issue, right? So that performance model does kind of, that must be a huge problem for follow-up on energy compliant buildings when you're not using a prescriptive process.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair point, and we see that even before we get to any modifications or renovations or anything, right? Like I mentioned, it is already a problem in terms of what the energy modeler assumes or uses in their model, what the designer or the architect thinks would work, and then what actually gets built. So going back to Al's original question, one of the challenges we have for smaller buildings and single family duplexes mostly, like I said, now and then we get the odd case where they don't have the energy labels. Since we started to be a bit more stringent on that, I think it's not an issue as much, fortunately. For part 3 buildings, to my surprise, it's even worse because now, again, it's not a matter of meeting the prescriptive requirement only, but we need to see what windows exactly are you going to put in that building, because your energy modeler is assuming some U value, some heat gain coefficient in their energy model. And the output of the result of that energy modeling exercise is really what determines whether you're compliant with the energy efficiency aspects of the code or not. And so, I think 9 out of 10 cases now, we get architectural drawings or mechanical drawings, and then I go through them and there is no mention of windows. So I guess a major issue now is that we're sending back these plans saying, well, where's your Windows schedule? And the typical answer is that, what are you talking about? We'll have to see what makes sense for us to, purchase, how much money we have to spend on Windows. So we can't tell you what kind of Windows we're going to use when we submit the building permit. And then my standard answer is that, well, you are telling me and you have to specify what kind of installation you're putting in the envelope assemblies. So you should also specify what kind of window assemblies or fenestrations you're using, because it's now part of the energy model. So the challenge is, I think, on the one hand, in terms of documentation and I guess bringing everybody up to speed that, you have to think about this. And this is a design decision that you need to make. It's not, it cannot be that, okay, I'll have to see my, my bank account and decide how much money I can spend on my windows, after I get my building permit. And on the other hand, then, and in a way, that's because we need to have a basis for inspections, right? As I mentioned, and I'm repeating myself, it's not only about meeting the prescriptive requirements anymore. Now, for each new building, the inspection is based on the basically your building permit drawings and your energy model. So the inspectors have a copy of that when they go out to the field and say, okay, well, your energy modeler used or assumed U value 1.6, your window label now shows you 1.7. That does meet the prescriptive requirements, but based on your energy modeler for this particular building, that's not compliant, and then they'll have to address that. Going back to the question of no prescriptive requirements, I agree with Zane personally that we do need to have some prescriptive requirements that set the minimum, and on top of that, some performance requirements. So in the Vancouver building bylaw, as you know, Vancouver is kind of operating differently outside the Building Act in BC, so they can do whatever they want. So in Vancouver building bylaw, they do have prescriptive requirements on top of performance. So your, let's say your U value cannot be above a certain number. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Let's say 1.6. But then again, when it comes to the energy modeling results, I still want to see, a performance level at a certain level.
How do you guys feel about requiring certified U values in energy ratings? So right now, that's not a code requirement. And so it means that some people can self-label and they haven't had those values properly checked and certified.
My thought on that would be, it'd be nice to get the whole window certified for performance and energy. Because once again, is that, everybody's been talking about energy, but it's great to have a window that has a great energy, but everything else could leak around it. That's not helping anybody. Okay. So if you've got a window or a door with no water penetration or no performance ratings, but you got a great piece of glass, well, that's all you got. So that's where I get a little, everybody's been focusing on energy, and there's more to the puzzle than just energy. And I don't know how you get that through with folks, but that everybody I listen to is they're talking about U values and all those things. But once again, you've got to look at all the parts of the puzzle.
But the NBC does state minimum requirements. It's already prescriptive in the code.
It says conform to, so I hate that in the code. So I agree with you, Dave. It leaves the building official, the person who needs to decide whether that label or that window conforms. I think certification is a good idea, because then at least you've got somebody visiting the plant every so often to make sure that they're following the procedures to allow them to label, just like any other UL device, something like a UL fire rating or something like that. If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah,
I've had lots of discussion about the word conforms to, and the word conforms to means it meets the standard. It doesn't mean you can meet the standard without the standard. You have to actually do the standard. When the word says conform to, you have to actually use the standard that it conforms to. You can't actually create your own and say it meets the standard.
No, but if it says conforms to me, I've always taken it that the building official needs to decide based on what they're telling you by putting a label whether it conforms, or as opposed to certified, which means someone else like CSA or UL is telling the building official it meets it. That's the way I've always looked at it, Zane.
No, but I think I got that back from NRC, that conforms to means certified, meets the standard, tested under the standard, done by the standard. I had this discussion about smoke detectors and stuff conforming to, and it came back. I'm quite certain that conforms to means you actually have to do it to the standard.
So technically it means that you've tested and you have a test report, but whether you are declaring, whether your labels are declaring the actual tested performance, you can't tell from the label if it doesn't have a certification mark on the label. So essentially, a label without a certification mark is a manufacturer's self-report saying, trust me, these are my values. Now, behind those values, there should exist test reports. If they are to conform with, to comply with the code, they need to have proof that they have, that they do conform to those values that are on the label. But a label without a certification mark is a trust me label. And I guess what you're saying, Gerald, you would like to know that you don't want it to be your job to figure out whether you can trust a label, you would rather have somebody else like UL or CSA do that for you.
Agreed.
Right, it puts a lot of liability on the municipality, and in order for, and let's be honest, we all can't be experts at everything. So for me to challenge that label, I would have to then tell them what am I challenging, and you know what, I might not know enough to challenge it. Whereas if it's a certified product like a plumbing fitting or something like that, they just need to talk to CSA or UL who will have the experts that will do that and make that assertion through the certification label.
That's a good that's an important point, and I think interestingly enough, I know that there was a time when Fenestration Canada had actually approached province of BC about that, because and whether or not certification could be put in the code, and the province was unwilling to actually amend their code to require certification. Simply because, well, I don't know why. They just didn't want to go there. And the national code has no conformity assessment requirements. They basically download that to the provinces. So, I think it's only at the provincial level that you could actually implement requirements for certification. But, that's really a conversation that perhaps, as building officials, trying to get, I don't know if you can communicate upwards to the ministries of housing in your province, but they would be the ones who would be able to address this concern. But Gerald, you made an interesting point about under the performance path, the value of high performance windows becomes evident. And now you're dealing with, do I spend more money on a furnace? Do I spend money on drain waste, heat recovery, or do I upgrade windows? And could you talk some more about that? In other words, what are builders finding? Are they finding that higher performing windows are actually a less expensive way of complying under a performance path?
Yeah, I think that, because Ontario, what it did was, it was a good discussion that you had about this performance prescriptive, because what basically the Ontario did was they created all this modeling and said you can model, but then they created, I think, 10 model packages, but made them prescriptive. You know what I mean? Run a model and then label it. And so a lot of builders at the very beginning were just choosing a package because they just needed to start. So they picked this package A. And it, of course, had a certain U value on windows, certain insulation values. And what I'm starting to see, though, is that as we've gone moving through time, more builders are experimenting and doing their own modeling. There's a couple of companies in Ontario that are really working a lot with the home builders to say, listen, let's do a model. Let's be more cohesive with our view. And I'm sure that we could find out that there's ways to save windows. Like, I'll be honest, like a drain waste heat recovery unit can be up to $500 a pop. And if you need 2 of them, that's $1,000. So how far could $1,000 go into windows? How far could that go into the furnace? So, and I am starting to see that a lot of them are, just because of that one item. I hate to pick on that particular device, but it is one device that there is a lot of controversy on in Ontario anyways. And so because they dislike them so much, they are pushing to spend, maybe $500 on the model, $500 to $600, and then putting that other money into, and then they're seeing that they can put money into windows. So I am seeing that. The other element of it is that the building code in Ontario says whenever you go over 22% window area, you are forced to upgrade the U value of the windows. So because so when I start to see them getting into the custom homes, they're being forced to put in those more efficient windows.
And are those more efficient windows triple glazed, or are they still double glazed?
I'm seeing more, I'm not seeing as many triple glazed, but the more efficient double glazed windows.
Right, okay. And Steve, I know that you kind of implied it in your introductory statement, but I know from previous discussions with you that you feel there's been a lot of focus on energy in your part of the country, and that people have kind of ignored the NAFS standard and the air water structural performance of products. And that's one thing that you have felt that that exclusively, the code isn't just about energy. The code requires your window to perform in a number of respects, and that you shouldn't ignore that NAFS testing portion of it.
No, and I think that the manufacturers are missing a great boat there, because what happens is that they can use their performance and the water penetrations for their advantage, because if their customers are out price shopping for windows, they can take those values and say, oh, I've got a tighter window, or I've got a better window than that, and use all those three pieces to assume for their purchasing. When they go to buy something, they look at that. I just see it last week where a manufacturer of a major manufacturer of window is now starting to push their performance ratings beside their energy ratings. They're saying, hey, we got these great performance ratings for our fenestrations, and along with our energy. And I just think that's great, because the higher performance windows, Gerald said, is that they're spending more money for a performing window, and that's a win situation for everybody.
So I see we've got some questions from from people who are watching this session, and I wonder if we could maybe look at answering some of them.
May I add quickly to what Steve just said?
Yes, certainly. Yes.
Well, I said that I'm focusing on energy, but I could not agree more with what Steve is saying. If you have a building in general that's leaking water or air, what do you care if it's energy efficient or not, right? So same thing goes for windows. If your windows air, water, structural performance is not adequate, then nobody could care less about the energy performance. But even with energy performance, I think in a similar way, we are somewhat putting too much emphasis on the U value, and then turning a blind eye on the solar performance of the building in terms of the solar heat gain. And we can talk about all sorts of issues that we are already seeing because of that. We can talk about overheating, comfort issues, resilience, and all that. So I definitely agree that we are somewhat obsessed with U value, and that may be dangerous.
Maybe talk some more about that relationship between U value and solar heat gain. What are the problems you're seeing more specifically, Sepehr?
Well, I would be repeating what I've learned from you, Al, but one of the problems is that we are, again, in this energy performance world, we are seeing designers and mostly energy modelers using high solar heat gain to drive down their active heating demand. So they think of solar gain as free heat, and then if you have a solar heat gain coefficient of 0.4, 0.5, that does go a considerable way in driving down your energy requirements, and then meet the the performance metrics of, let's say, the step code. Now, I think there is the problem of the issue of overheating with that. Recently, we had a single family house with solar heat gain coefficients of 0.5, and it had considerable south and east facing windows. So I'm just scared to look at that. I don't want to live in that house. I don't want to be in that house ever. But my hands are somewhat tied, because I don't really have the grounds for rejecting that or disallowing that. I can only resort to education and talking to the energy advisor and the designer and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. And then the practical aspect of that is that, can you even get that product in the market? So it becomes, again, a question of consistency of what I design and model, and then what gets installed and used in the actual construction. Yeah, but I think the issue of overheating is gonna hit us very soon. We're already there with all this emphasis on driving down heating demand. Basically, I think overheating and solar gains are gonna become the next leaky condo crisis for us. And I think the audience here and the industry has a large role to play here, because they can also help everybody else in that education effort and talk to their clients about why they don't want a high solar heat gain window, especially east and south facing facades.
Thank you. Thank you, Sepehr. So let's look at some of the questions here. First one is from Mahmoud. He's asking, did Ontario get rid of the permanent thermal performance label requirement of CSA A440.2 for residential windows and doors? what would be the course of action from the building inspector if in Ontario, if a new built residential unit comes with a window without permanent thermal performance labels? Does that question make sense to you as presented?
I
Gerald?
think there might be a little bit of a misunderstanding there. So a permanent label is only required when it's certified product. And I don't think Ontario's, are you requiring a certification of your thermal results?
No, but the code, like we discussed, says that the windows shall meet the testing requirements and conform to the A440 standard. So again, it really comes back to this question. It's not certified. However, how does the building official determine on site that it conforms to the standard? We do that by reading a label. So if there's no label, then we're going to reject it. Maybe ask the window manufacturer to provide some more information to show that it meets. But no, most building officials in Ontario are looking for labels. So I guess the second part to that question is if it doesn't have a label, be prepared to hand them a binder from the manufacturer that ensures that that window meets it, because it's the job of the building official to ensure that it conforms. And like you said, because it's not certified, we can't get a third party to do that for us. The building official would need to make that call.
I wonder if the question is about the Ontario energy regulation. That I believe, BC has an energy efficiency standards regulation that requires all energy performance labels to be certified by a third-party organization, and the applicable organizations are identified in the Act. I'm wondering, I believe Ontario has the same requirement. However, because if it's a provincial regulation, it's not in the code. And so the question might be, we were told we're supposed to have certified energy performance labels, but building officials aren't asking for them or looking for them. Perhaps, is it possible that building officials aren't aware that there is perhaps a provincial regulation that requires the labels to be certified? And if that was the case, you would be well within your rights as a building official to insist on the certified label. But I don't know the details of the Ontario regulation, but I'm wondering if that's behind the question that Mahmoud has. Maybe he could clarify that subsequently. Another question. Yes.
Just to make one point, in the Ontario, it's in the building code itself, Ontario Building Code. There would be no other provincial regulation other than the Ontario Building Code. So I really wouldn't see Ontario is good in one respect, that anything with regard to regulations of building, septics and plumbing and everything is all put in one document. So I doubt there's another document that I know of.
I think it might be worth looking into that, because it could be, the windows could be regulated as energy devices. And see, the regulations, for example, the BC regulation regulates manufacturers. It regulates the manufacturer and requires them to comply as a manufacturer with a labeling regulation. So it's possible that that regulation has been communicated to the industry, but may not have been communicated to building officials. And because provincial regulations are generally administered in a separate way, frankly, there's not much enforcement of them, and it's very difficult to actually do anything except take a non-compliant manufacturer to court, which is, so difficult that it's rarely done. So these regulations can be somewhat toothless in from a practical point of view, but it might be worth looking into, because I've been told that the Ontario regulation does require certified labels. Again, I can't verify that independently, but if it does, it would give building officials the grounds to, knowing about that would allow you then to, in effect, not so much be the enforcers of the regulation, but to demand a higher level of compliance documentation than you might be getting now. But again, that would be something to explore. Here's a question from Vince. If you have tested with a certified lab and have the test reports from the lab, can those not be submitted as proof along with the labels?
Al, I'll grab that one for you. I've had the test reports sent to me because where the quote sheets, they don't have their quote sheets up to speed, or if they don't have whatever, or their labels up to speed, or there's an issue with the label, I've had the test reports submitted to me for review. The only time it gets a little dicey is when you get combination windows with the mullions and trying to figure out their test reports and their and the structural and the water penetrations on the mullions assemblies. You know, it's kind of, for a building inspector, reading those test reports is sometimes a little bit difficult, but yes, I have had them and reviewed them and accepted some windows to go in there. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Would
I think
anyone
we
else
may be
care
in
to
the
comment?
we may be in a better position in the future to properly cover mullions. Right now, it's been a little bit of a gray area in NAFS, but the AMA 450 standard, which is a NAFS reference, has been updated to provide more guidance to engineers in how they can they can qualify a large variety of multi-light configuration based on a smaller amount of testing with some engineering.
Yeah. But, you know, for us building inspectors, we're not engineers, and it's tough to sometimes to read these test reports, and you have to phone a friend or figure out what, you know, what the heck they all mean. But, you know, at the end of the day is we generally, you know, have gone down that and had a look at them and got the window. That's the beauty of the quote sheets, because that again is I could do that from my desk. I'm not doing it out the job site, trying to figure it out with a contractor on whether his window's got to stay or not.
Would you have any comment on that, Gerald or Zane, on the test report question?
Yeah, I think that, again, it comes back to that. We'd all love to have, you know, a test report or a certification, but again, it's up to the building official to make the distinction and make the, right, whether it meets the code. And it can be a little open, and I'd like to see it certified myself. It makes the job easier for the building official, but when it conforms to it, but labels I find are important. How the heck are we supposed to know if it isn't labeled? So you need to label it. I pretty much give someone a hard time if I don't see a label.
I would say we're upwards past 90% of labeled product. So we're very blessed. We don't seem to run into the same issues that you guys are doing right now. So we do have some stuff that comes up from the States the odd time, and that's our biggest problem would be them. Yeah.
Okay.
But Zane, are your labels, the labels that you say you have out there, are they showing all the NAFS requirements and the energy on the labels?
Yes.
Okay.
And in the quote, and we asked for that too. We asked for
good.
For the, you know, we asked for the sheet that's provided by the manufacturer that shows all the energy ratings and performance ratings, etc. Yes, you bet.
That's great.
I'd agree too. In Ontario, I'd say 99% of the time we're seeing labels. It's just that one odd time where someone tries to take the labels off early because they don't like the look of them.
Right.
But you're also required to specify a performance grade in accordance with A440S1 supplement to NAFS. And I can tell you in Southern Alberta, in Lethbridge, we have some of the highest 1 in 50 hourly wind pressure values in all of Canada. And I don't hear a peep out of Lethbridge about why aren't these windows labeled PG45, which might be the requirement in some circumstances.
We have another question here. Does the label have to be affixed to the windows, or can they be provided?
Well, I think the answer to that, they got to be affixed to the window.
There's no provision in NFRC labeling for anything other than factory labeling, and you know that's why the city of Vancouver will actually ask for the windows to be uninstalled, shipped back to the factory, and labeled at the factory. Now, I think Rick Zolmer has brought up a very important point that we should get to there, Al. That was asked before this second question.
Which one was that?
He says, may I ask why none of the panel have mentioned issues with installation of fenestration products and the need to check for proper installation as per code?
So this is
how do they feel about having certified installation requirements?
Well, let's answer Rick's question first. Installation. do you guys face challenges with window installation? Do you
Oh,
inspecting window installation?
It's the
boy.
toughest part, man. But there is a 440. So under Part 9, have some issues. Once you move away from Part 9, then you're into Part 3, and architects can be vague at times on their drawings, and that it does impact installation issues. Yeah.
But comment on Part 9 installation.
One of the things I like about the EAFS system, the insulated systems, is that a lot of the CCMC approvals give some very clear installation details on their approvals. So maybe taking some advice from the CCMC approvals for just standard window installation, I think that would be a great idea to be able to, instead of articulate through code requirements, but have a sheet of paper with details that everybody follows the same song sheet. That would be nice.
I see a lot of manufacturers with their labeling on installation here, and they just refer to the standard. But and a lot of contractors really don't understand or read the standard. But in the installation, we're getting, you know, through pushing, I'm getting a little bit of installation through here. One of the things that we've had is the code requirement asks for a 1-inch end dam. And if you've seen a full 1-inch end dam over the top of a window, it doesn't look very pretty. So, you know, we're allowing an alternate solution with a little bit of lower end dam, getting a compliance in there. The other issue that I'm having is the standard asks for a backer rod. That's a hard hill to get into, but you know, so we're taking a little bit of steps here. I've got, you know, the slope sills, the sill pan, the head flashing, all except for the backer rod. But so I think we're getting about 90%, 95% compliance and installation here.
You know, at one time, the manufacturer actually specified how the product was to be installed. And since A440 has become front and center, they moved away, and now they just tell you to meet the standard. Because one of the problems was that they told you how to install their window, and they'd never leak. They would never leak if you installed it according to their manufacturers. But the membrane around the window would just leak like a sieve because they're not responsible for the membrane. You see, so it's better that they've gone away from telling people how to install their windows, and we have a standard to do it to. So I believe that's been a plus.
Yeah, but have you tried reading the A440 installation standard lately? It's a bear of a document.
It's pretty it's pretty intense,
so
depending on, but you got to remember, in an area you end up with one type of install basically would handle 80% of all the windows, whereas A440 of course has various styles of installation. But when you're in an area and it's all wood frame residential, then really you're just doing one install type.
But the manufacturer could take the A440 for their flange windows and develop a standard, which some of the manufacturers have done here. And this is the standard out of the A440, and put that out to their contractors, and rather than tell them to go find it in the standard. And some of the manufacturers have done that, which has helped. But
that's dangerous for a manufacturer.
Is it?
You know, because they're providing, they're allowing others to place reliance on them for something that they don't have supervision over. And in the event of a building envelope failure, they can come back and say, you know, you didn't train me properly, you gave me bad advice, you own this building envelope failure.
Well, then who is it up to? You know, I know that the contractors are responsible for their installation, but once again, as you end up as a building inspector, kind of you got to say, well, no, you don't have it installed right. You almost end up educating the contractor because they're not looking in the standard.
Well, City of Calgary came up with some recommendations based on their interpretation of the code. So they do require a membrane at the subsill and up the jambs, but they don't require sloped and flashed subsill with positive drainage, and they do require that the nail fin not be sealed at the sill.
Okay. But but their climatic data would determine whether their slope sill is or not.
That's correct.
Yes.
It,
So
it's quite a document, and the problem is that it should really be in the code. It should be really in an appendix. It should really have some installation designs and some very walkthrough stuff for people to really truly use it properly. But we don't do that in our code books. We're not illustrative enough, in my opinion.
they do put the head flashing in the code book, but once again, with a 1-inch head flash, with a 1-inch end dam with a 6% slope, you know, I just can't, if you ever look at a window that's got a 1-inch gap above the window showing the aluminum, it's pretty ugly. The intent
Well,
of
it's never said you can't fill it. You just have to have the flashing there.
yes, but again, is that what I've seen them, you know, again, they want to leave that aluminum up there. What we've done here is with the end dam and let them come down a little bit more. So the intent of the water is to get it out.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to move on to one more point here. The Pauline Richards is commenting that the Ontario Electrical Act requires windows to be thermally certified. I think this is the regulation, Gerald, for Ontario. You might want to look into that. Pauline Richards is a window certification consultant, so she knows her stuff. So I believe the Ontario Electrical Act requires windows to have certified labels. And it's something you might want to
So
look
is
into.
it the electrical inspector from the Electrical Safety Authority that's going to
Well,
be
you know,
enforcing this provision?
It's probably
Why
because
me?
it's probably because they're considered energy devices, right? So
Good
again,
point.
there might be some legal framework within which that looked like a logical place for the lawyers to put it. But
doesn't it?
But that being the case, this might be something you might be interested in.
Hey, that's awesome.
The next comment here is from Mahmoud. Yes, he was wondering about conformity and how that's interpreted. And he was pointing to how the BC bylaw handles certification. Does Ontario have any similar mechanism? So I think we're kind of answering your question, Mahmoud. It looks like Ontario's Electrical Act has the same kind of requirement as BC for certified labels. And then we have a comment from Patrick Flannery. Is there one thing window manufacturers can do differently to lessen the chances of their window product running into problems? Anyone care to give an opinion?
I think I can answer that one.
From
So
your
you need to
perspective?
properly, when it's a nail fin installation and that's an integral part of the way it's going to be integrated into the building envelope, you need to make sure that that is protected in shipping and handling, so as the nail fin does not become damaged, because that can become your point of egress, is the damage to the nail fin at the corners from improper handling during shipping.
So you're saying that's one thing window manufacturers can do?
Yes, and we have a prescribed method for repairing broken nail fin with an injection molded part that can be used to repair a certain amount of breakage at the corner, but not too much.
Anything on your wish list, Zane? One thing the window manufacturers could do?
They could do more testing on all commercial fenestrations, especially
Okay.
doors.
Right.
Yeah.
Sepehr?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about installation, and I think with going towards more airtight buildings in general, that can be increasingly a problem or concern. And one thing that I think, I'm just throwing this out there, so I have never seen a window product where the air barrier layer, the vapor barrier layer, and so on and so forth are clearly labeled. And then when I get that window, I look at that and I say, okay, I need to have my air barrier continuous. So this is where I need to tie my window frame to my air barrier, and then I make sure they're taped and caulked and sealed, right? So I think if it helps with the installation issues if window products were more clearly labeled in terms of the function of each of these different components and layers.
You know what Calgary did about that? If you have an add-on jam extension, that needs to be properly sealed to the window frame in order to not bypass the seal to the innermost vapor and moisture barrier, and they enforce that, and they enforce proper sealing of that to the heel of the jam liner.
Gerald?
rates, make sure the labels are on there so we can see them. And I really like this idea of an installation type manual. And one of the things that I do work is in the fire side of things with fire stopping, and they don't let you just test the actual device. You need to test the assembly it goes into. So I don't know if this is from the testing side, but I think that there should be, I know, of course, the manufacturers don't want to take responsibility for what's on beside their product, but I think somebody needs to be, because like Steve said, why does the building official have to be the one to do it? So I think there should be some onus on the manufacturer to provide installation details that comply with the NAFS standard. And they need to look at all the different options. Yes, it's a brick. There's a brick here. It's siding. They need to provide all those things, because if they don't do it, then all it becomes is an argument between the building official and the installer on the proper installation without any direction. Yeah, I've asked
Our
question.
lawyers will not let us do that. I'm just going to tell you right up front. Our lawyers would. They want us to refer to the A for 40.4 and provide general advice on the fastening of the window, but they will not let us give specific advice regarding the integration into the building envelope.
If you were a fire stop manufacturer in Ontario, your lawyers would tell you that too, but the government has forced them to. And I think the problem we have here is that when I get somebody asked for the detail on how they installed it, they don't have anything from the manufacturer. So they just sketch something out in a piece of paper. They find a brochure or something on the internet and they throw that at me. And I think really there needs to be an onus on the window manufacturer to say, this is how you install our product in a envelope. But again, it's all about liability and passing it on. I get it.
Or maybe a body like Fenestration Canada, or NRC, and people that should get together as a group with manufacturers to design a installation guide across Canada that would satisfy everybody's and make it free, just like the codes are now, that is available online through NRC or CSA or anybody that they can download and use in the field. So
there's some research going on that Fenestration Canada is heavily involved in, involving Jan Eeks and Red River College and another college in Ontario, I believe. So we are looking at that.
But Dave, could you not even give them the section of the code section, because the code has pictorial diagrams. Give them the 3 pages or whatever it is of the code section and say, we're not telling you to do this, but this is how the code wants it done.
I have constructed and sent very carefully worded emails to try and assist people who want some advice on a case-by-case basis.
But once again is that that you're putting the onus on the contractor and the building inspector, and to install your product, which again is that I know the A440 will give you the installation, but again you have to break that down to the guy that's driving nails and hammers, because he wants to do a decent job. But when you talk to him about a head flashing, right, and you got to show him how to bend a head flashing, or you got to show him about a slope sill. Again, these standards are great. If everybody could understand them and they're free, but most guys don't look at that. They know how to install the window. They're doing a decent enough job. They just need some guidance from the manufacturer on that. And that's the way I think it should go.
Well, I think that's probably one of the things that has become clear out of this session here. That is probably the most interesting thing that we're hearing as a fenestration association and as manufacturers. So we should take that under consideration, I think.
One of the things I would say to you guys in the industry is that make it easier for consumers, change the dialogue a little bit, right? Make sure the consumers are aware of the performance and NAFS information, and just say get that dialogue changed a little bit so that the consumers are asking for the NAFS information as long as the energy, and that'll sort of aid in the building inspector end of it, because again is that we can't be the lone ones out there yelling and screaming for this stuff. It's going to be driven from because most of the consumers, they're already looking for the energy, so it's just a matter of a little bit more. And the installation end of it, I think it's fairly, most cases windows are, The contractors want to do a decent job. They just need some guidance.
Just have a
And
few more.
It's the biggest
Yeah.
area of water, like fenestration. Why are we not spending more time ensuring that the details of these openings have been done correctly? There's no worse spot to like the best spot to focus on. So I think
But
there
not
really
only the
needs some
window,
onus on that.
the membrane and how it's connected to the building envelope. It's a building envelope issue. It's not a window issue. It is really a building envelope issue, and has to be done as an assembly and as a complete whole, not as little pieces, right? The amount of the window telling the person how to do his window. And like I said, in the old days, they glued it to the wall, literally. But there was no membrane issue.
You know
There
what?
was no,
I think
it never
energy codes are going to start to assist this, because as we move up the higher steps, they're going to take a lot closer look at the energy efficiency and the U value of the window to wall interface, and they're going to stop ignoring that. And so the conversation is going to be had in the context of the U value in that area, and the ability to handle water and reject it to the exterior.
and air.
Yeah.
Yes.
And here in Atlantic Canada, the installation is more critical, because what we have is we've got a unique phenomena here where we call the manufacturers are putting in what they call a built-in J. So traditionally what happens is around a window, you have a brick mold that goes all the way around a window. Well, what they've done is they've taken the top of the brick mold off. So what happens now is you've got a, so that the siding could go down, you've got a channel there for the water to slide down through, all the way down through the water. So I don't think there's any other places in the country that produce a window that has these built-in J's. So it's critical, if they have a built-in J window with the brick mold cut out, that the flashing be done correctly so they get the water down and out.
You know, in the
Looks
old
like-
days when we had tar paper and they were done and it was lapped properly, when it was lapped properly, you could remove that tar paper in the walls and the window. There was no leakage. They were perfect. Of course, when they did it wrong or lapped it backwards, we always did see major damage. But its principle was easy because we shed water to the outside. When we went to single membranes, that's when all the problems started to come together, is when we went to, you know, Typar and Tyvek and those things, which were full sheets. People didn't know how to handle that and did not understand that you still had to get the water out if it got in. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's where I think the greatest problem arose from installation.
Well, we certainly learned that in British Columbia with the leaky building crisis. You know, and the other thing we learned is that one of the reasons those walls were so nice and dry, Zane, is because they were so thermally inefficient and leaked so much air. We basically dried them out with energy, right? All the energy was leaking through the wall and drying it out and keeping it from rot. And once you start adding more insulation, the temperatures drop and you add barriers to both sides, and now you clearly you create a plastic bag with water in it and wood, and you know, unless you're super careful about what you do. So, but definitely your point is well taken in the sense that I think it's more complicated now to install windows in an energy efficient wall, because our efforts to improve its energy performance have added more risk factors and require a higher level of skill and competence in correctly layering things and correctly connecting the right control layers in the wall. So you know, we are facing new challenges as a result of our energy efficient need to be more energy efficient about it.
You may need at some point to be certified to install a window because of that complication that you're talking about.
I think one of the big takeaways from this conversation today is that it seems like there's a lot of consensus from you guys on how important installation is. We actually realize this is a huge challenge in the industry, and we're grappling with how to do it, because we have different building practices across the country. We don't have uniform compliance with the code. We don't have basically the builders don't want to pay extra money for professional installers to install windows. The thinking is, they just want somebody to do it fast and cheap. And the window manufacturers are dealing with so-called service issues from improperly installed windows. And this is a big problem on large buildings and a problem on small buildings, where the people who install the products have no connection to the manufacturer, and the walls are becoming more complicated, the issues becoming more challenging. And I think actually what you guys are saying is we actually should have trained installers who understand enough building science and who understand enough about the products to make intelligent installation decisions within a training program that includes the installation standard, so that we actually have skilled, qualified tradespeople installing windows in these walls. I think that would go a long way to resolving the issues. The situation we have now, it's completely unregulated and there's no clear line of accountability for the installation.
Maybe it should be part of the Apprenticeship Act in various provinces.
That would only work if a window installer was a recognized trade, right? To be apprenticed in.
Good point. Right. Not every guy's they're framers, not. Yeah.
Exactly. So, it either needs to be a qualification to an existing trade or a new trade that would actually provide those skills and knowledge.
But some windows are getting installed by the homeowners, and there's a lot of people out there that are doing their own windows besides contractors. And once again, if the instructions are there from the manufacturers on how to install a window, generally the homeowner can follow A to B and normally do probably a decent job. So you don't want to leave out the do-it-yourself or the handyman, besides the contractors, there is a lot of being installed by homeowners.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to kind of wrap this up eventually.
You're on a roll.
Well, I'm good. It's just, because we need to prepare for the next presentation in a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to mention it. So Al and Dave, if you still have, you still have like a 2-3 minutes. So if you want to add something and
I'm actually late for a meeting, but it's not as important as this meeting.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank each of you for taking the time to speak with us and with each other today. We do appreciate hearing from you. It's actually very interesting to hear the perspectives from different regions, but also your uniform, concern about installation, and definitely something that, we are thinking about as well, and hopefully we'll be able to take some meaningful action on in the next year or two. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and answering questions. And we may want to repeat a Builder Officials panel again in a future conference.
I think so.
Stefan, what is the next session?
Next session is the growing demand for passive house windows in Canada. So it's
great. Thanks.
Easing on that topic.
All right.
Okay. Well, so thanks everyone. Thanks to Quanix, and see you guys in a couple of minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.